going to be RISC OS Developments. The second half will be RComp. I was intending to wear a hat for the RISC OS Developments, but it's still in the car, so can I put... Oh, you sir are an absolute star. Today, this is the RISC OS Developments hat. I started wearing a hat during the RISC OS Developments talk because some people on forums started complaining that they couldn't tell when I was on Andrew of RComp and when I was Andrew of RISC OS Developments. So when I'm talking about RISC OS Developments, that's my hat. Forums understood. So, as you know, RISC OS Developments concentrate on doing open source development for RISC OS to try and solve big problems. You've seen us talk in the past about Iris, you've seen Pinboard 2, you've seen network stack with IPv6, and so on and so forth. You know, if it comes to trying to tackle something, we try and tackle it. Today, I'm going to be showing you the next stage of the network stack development, namely Wi-Fi, firewall, IPv6, you name it, complete modern networking working on RISC OS. So that's why I wanted to do the screen, because what you're going to see next is the network manager. Let's see. What we've been working on is Wi-Fi in two forms. Firstly, Wi-Fi via USB, and secondly, Wi-Fi via SDIO, which is the SDIO is the bus on which SD cards and things are written, but it's also how Wi-Fi chips are connected on things like Raspberry Pis, Pinebooks. Pretty much every modern ARM device uses SDIO. Now, RISC OS Developments had some work done about 2 years ago to add SDIO support to RISC OS, but until we actually had things using the SDIO, there was really no way of testing to see whether the SDIO work actually did what it said on the tin. So what we started with was doing Wi-Fi via USB, because the USB system is understood, and therefore we could test the USB and know what we were dealing with to get the Wi-Fi going, then switch to SDIO when we got to a certain point. So basically we took the USB stuff to a point where it was scanning and seeing Wi-Fi networks, and then we switched over to SDIO development with the aim of getting to the same point with SDIO and fixing any bugs in SDIO as we went. And needless to say, there were some problems, which is why it's taken us a year rather than 6 months. But those problems have been resolved, and we now have Wi-Fi using the USB or using the SDIO. And the SDIO is probably going to be the first thing to come out, simply because it covers both the Raspberry Pi and the Pinebook Pro, which are the two main devices that people are wanting to run Wi-Fi on, and it's pretty agnostic. Pi, you know, everybody's using nothing RComp specific to Raspberry Pi, so you know we can issue Wi-Fi for everybody and Wi-Fi for Pinebook Pro, which is obviously more of an RComp interactive thing, as a side bonus, as it were. So what you're seeing here on the icon bar is Network Manager and the Wi-Fi system. Now, it says import because it's imported the network settings from the traditional network configuration setup into a profile called imports. The network manager is profile based, so essentially you start out with a default profile, which is what the import one is acting as, but you can set up like a home profile, a work profile, and so on for different network configurations. And then if you change your location of your device, you simply say, oh, I'm in work now, click, and you've got your network configuration for your work applied, rather than network configuration for your home applied. So that means you don't have to reconfigure everything manually every single time. And that's important for Wi-Fi because you need something that's very much more dynamic, picking up everything automatically for a Wi-Fi type setup. So, we'll concentrate on the Wi-Fi because that's the bit that you're probably interested in. And if I press menu over this, which you'll see in a second, you can see it has come up with a list of Wi-Fi networks. Now, as you can see, there's not much of a signal in here. So if we look down here, Arnos, Manor, Wi-Fi, and they're all pretty minimal signal strength. There's a second column here which tells us they're encrypted. So what I'm going to do is get my mobile phone out, and I am going to create a hotspot. Hotspot turning on, and then I'm going to sit down on the table there. And with that menu still open, I'm going to wait.
My phone's just appeared.
Someone's already done it. Motorola Edge 2 has appeared with full signal strength and a padlock to tell us that that's an encrypted network. Now, I think this version, one of the things I was sort of trying to do while I was panicking was run the version that's I was supposed to be showing. I think this is the one that I put on before I left. So basically what will happen is you will click on those and it will basically give you a login prompt to log in. Now the version which Andy put on this morning actually does all of that, but I think, let's just say, I think this is still the, this is still the version he sent me a week ago. So you'll need to come to the stand to see the rest of the demo, but suffice to say, on the stand, it is connecting to the Wi-Fi and giving us a full Wi-Fi connection, allowing us to browse. So on the stand, there is a Hydra machine, which is running entirely on Wi-Fi on the stand. As I say, he did put it on here, but I can't quickly find where he put it on. I appreciate how it sounds. It's been one of those weeks. One of those months, actually. I won't go into too much detail, but life has been interesting for the last 6 to 8 weeks.
Maybe an interesting time.
That's the one. So, I can't see quite where he's put the... He was working on it, doing stuff on the Pinebook this morning and showing me stuff, and I can't see where he's put the latest stuff. So we're just going to have to roll with that. You could see that it's doing it. Hold on a minute. Oh, it's done it. So basically you can see it's got the thing. Because while it's connecting, it's got a little minus sign comes up, and then when it connects, it's there. So yeah, I think we're there. So basically, Wi-Fi on RISC OS. Now you're going to say, when can you have it? Because that's the question you're all wanting to know. Basically, I'm hoping we'll be able to roll out the beta between now and Wakefield. And if all heavens align, then Wakefield will be able to take it home generally and play with it. But if you opted in to be in our beta test, it's a free thing, just email us and say, I want to beta test it. Then I hope we'll be sending you beta test copies in March. Certainly, once it's working, the next thing we want to do is push it out to people to play with. So essentially, if you email us and say, I want to beta test the TCP/IP stack, then hopefully you will get a rollout in March with all of this working. So that's Wi-Fi. But there is more. Because if we look at our profiles, our interfaces and things, and we click on there, you'll see a few more things that we can do. Now, you know about IPv6 because it's been talked about on the Google forums, and we've been offering it for a while, so that's all integrated in. The network manager basically replaces or works in parallel with, but is intended to replace, the traditional rather clumsy iNet setup tool that comes with RISC OS. So you can see we can configure things. We've got settings for DNS, ShareFS, and then each individual network interface that you would have. If I plugged in a USB one, you would have a USB interface. If I go to the Wi-Fi one, you can see we're on automatic address assignment, which is what you would expect for a Wi-Fi setup. It hasn't filled this in because I think beta. You can see there's the support for the IPv6, and then a button for wireless networks, which I don't think he's programmed up yet. But you can see that working through the other bit, so I think it's just not linked up. So you can configure your basic settings through that, but then also new, we have a firewall. So this is something that was sort of, we saw with the RISC OS limited builds of RISC OS back in the day. They have some simplistic firewall stuff that I don't think anybody ever used because it was a little bit complicated and most people didn't know how it worked. So we tried to go a little bit better. So we can go add rule. And basically you've got a setup screen to allow you to block things and open things up. So what we have here, we can tick all interfaces, in which case it's going to apply to everything. We can add a service, so we can say, well, actually, we want to block, let's pick something, I don't know, PPPTP 1723, and add that service. We can choose where it's coming from. We can add an address that it's coming from if we just want to block one thing, or we can say block all addresses attempting to access our machine. Or we could add a range of services. And then once we're done, we add rule, and then we can tell it to block or allow specific ports, specific ranges of ports, specific IP addresses blocked, specific ranges of IP address, and so on. So basically you can completely lock down your RISC OS network system if you're connecting it directly to a live network that you're concerned about security on, in much the same way as you could on other platforms, with a nice friendly graphical interface, straight from the network manager. And again, in the next beta. There's another section for share requests so that we can add network shares, again with a nice graphical user interface. That's from RISC OS to RISC OS machine sharing, and you can see the profile name at the top. So we can set up different sets of these configurations for each profile that we want. So we might say that when we're at work, we want to completely lock down the firewall settings, so that the rest of the work network can't be messing with our RISC OS box. And when we're at home, we might say, well, we really don't care because we know we trust the router. Or more to the point, let's say we're doing Wi-Fi or we're in McDonald's, you probably want to lock it down a little bit. When you're back at home, you probably don't care so much, so you work on a home profile with a much less restrictive set of firewall settings. So, yeah, Wi-Fi, IPv6, firewall. Pretty much that's a tick on networking, isn't it, really? So, yeah, beta in March, hopefully out by Wakefield. Don't hold me to that because software development is software development. Yes.
Hi, Andrew. On the firewall,
yes.
are you going to have you were talking about locking down, somebody who knows what they're doing could go in individually, but rather like in Windows, you can have a minimalistic click on this and it'll just...
Yeah, I mean, this is the first draft of the UI, so it was sort of, the way the development went is one of these sort of classic programmer things. Oh, I found the bit of the IP stack that does the firewall. Oh, it works. Oh, it doesn't quite do that. Let's enable that bit of the stack. Oh, that works too now. Let's put a front end on it that doesn't look completely stupid.
Yeah.
That's what you're seeing. So, as you can see, it's not a... I would say it's quite a good UI for, given that it's probably about 2 weeks
worth of work.
Yeah. But this is one of the things with the TCP/IP stack. We've been doing so much groundwork over the last few years that actually enabling a lot of this stuff, when it comes to it now, is just a case of find the bit of source code and compile it in and off it goes, sort of thing. I mean, not always 100%, but it does work like that now. So, other information, the Wi-Fi security supports WEP, obviously, the various versions of WEP, WPA, WPA2, etc. So that should cover pretty much every Wi-Fi network out there. Some Wi-Fi networks require you to log in. That's why we have a browser called Iris. So, not a lot of movement in Iris since I last talked to you sort of before Christmas, but We did put out a new beta in January. Richard is putting a lot of pressure on me to have a public release by Wakefield. I think that's asking a bit much because there's still quite a bit of back-end stuff that we need to get sorted. One of the big delays on Iris has been coping with upstream changes that currently the Iris engine is based on code that's about 18 months old. And one of the things we wanted to do before public release was get bang up to date on the back-end changes. Now, what scuppered us slightly is the fact that until recently, they have various compile options that could make it nice for compiling for RISC OS type machines, most notably sort of no particular dependence on hardware acceleration and 3D acceleration and things like that. The latest builds have jettisoned the ability to make that configurable, so everything requires hardware acceleration. That's a kind of a problem for RISC OS, since we don't really have hardware acceleration. So what we've had to do is, it's RISC OS Developments, what are we going to do? Tackle hardware acceleration. This has been a bit of a delay because what we've been trying to do is port an up-to-date 3D OpenGL system to RISC OS. Latest Mesa 3D, that is basically working, but that then needs plugging into Iris in such a way that ideally we can actually sort of disable it within Iris so that machines that can't cope with hardware 3D acceleration can still function with Iris. Quite a lot of work. So what we've actually done, the January build is actually we've actually got two streams of development now going on Iris. One is the hardware accelerated version for the future. And because I basically said, look guys, it's all nice that you've got that going, but we really need to get something out in 2024, not go into another phase of beta in 2024 to test the new hardware acceleration version. So what we're probably going to be doing here is producing a updated version of where we're at currently as of 1.0 to get it out into people's hands so that RISC OS has a free open source web browser that is decent, and then have a V2 coming along concurrently for probably, release, not hopefully a million miles later, that is using the newer engine with the OpenGL stuff in it. And that way we're not having to run lots of complicated start from scratch beta tests on all the new functionality before we can get you something to actually take advantage of. So on Iris, it's not such exciting news, I'm afraid, because of that. On the other hand, we are taking seriously getting you a product that you can get out there and use. And anybody who's in the audience that says, but I haven't got Iris yet, and I don't want to spend £40 on Iris, if you come and talk, I'm not going to announce it in the talk, but if you come to talk to me on the stand, I will happily give you a free access code to get Iris, so there's nobody in this room should be leaving this show without being able to access and download themselves a copy of Iris to run on the machine. So just come to the stand and say, Andrew, what's the URL? I will give you the URL and you'll be able to go home and download Iris. The only reason I'm not doing it in the talk is because the talk goes online and then online onto YouTube, and we could get our servers being absolutely pounded by people trying to download Iris for machines that don't even, know better. So I'd rather not open myself up to that. You just come to the stand and say, Andrew, I want Iris, and I'll say, right, you can go here, and you've got free Iris. So it's not trying to, so nobody should leave without Iris, is the main thing I'm saying. There are still a few difficulties compatibility-wise that I want to address, particularly to do with the shared library system, which is a perennial bugbear between different versions of the GCC compiling system, getting them all to play nice together. And this, I've been talking about this for, feels like forever, so my intention was to sit down with it in January and put some real hours into it. As I said, January has, for parental family reasons, been interesting. Yeah, haven't had time to do that, I'm sorry. Basically, family in hospital multiple times. There's only so many times you can see the wee hours in A&E and not, yeah. you know where I'm coming from. So, that's RISC OS Developments. Cache first.
Your question over there.
Sorry.
Can you give us a quick summary on the January IRIS changes?
Thank you. Good question. Not a lot. Basically, it was, as I recall, the changelog is in the zip. It was mostly to try and tackle a couple of things that people had reported, and to tidy up some user interface issues. I think there was supposed to be some better support for cashless as well. I know it sounds bad, but I didn't check the BB file before I left, and it's kind of gone out of my head in all the chaos. Essentially, it was a sort of short, 5 or 6 line set of largely sort of RISC OS user interface type improvements, rather than anything sort of heavy to do with backend. I know we did try to address certain websites come up with an error message about blob : protocol, and so we have made the browser internally handle blob : itself, although that doesn't seem to have necessarily fixed all of the sites that were complaining about blob : so, but I know that was a sort of architectural thing that people were, some of the banks were using, so for the statement system. So we tried to tackle that, and as I say, various sort of user interface elements. If I remember rightly, one of them was to do with the password manager, that it's now possible to disable the password manager if you're not somebody who, several users didn't want to use the password manager to save their passwords and things. So it's now possible to say, I don't want to use the password manager, and not be bothered by pop-ups saying, would you like to store your password, and things like this. So it's cosmetically...
Have you fixed the source code problem?
I think so. I think there was something about sort of
For example, if you're looking at a local HTML file and you're asked to look at the source code, you get to look at the source code in the scrap file, not next to...
Yeah, I believe there was a fix in the late... I believe there was something about that in the... There was certainly something about viewing source.
Okay.
Whether it was that or whether it was something else, but there was certainly something in the README about viewing source files. So I think the answer is yes.
Right.
If not, I'll go put the send me an email and I'll put the programmer again.
I think it's worth doing that one because...
Oh, I agree. As I say, I think it is. If it's not, that sounds easy for the programmer to sort, so I'll just forward your email to him and hopefully we'll get that sorted. So, yeah.
Yeah, I was wondering with the firewall thing, you're limited by what the router firewall is set up by, I take it. So, like, I was wondering in a public place, you obviously don't know what rules they allow in and out, so would there be any time when there'd be a way to work out how that's configured? Because they put open and closing ports on your machine, if you can't do it, there's router stopping it.
Yeah. So basically, this is, as far as I know, there isn't really a mechanism to say to a router what ports do you have open and what do you have closed.
Right.
I might be wrong on that because there is I forget what it's called. There is a sort of router auto-config protocol that's, the name of it is slipping my mind.
Right.
It's right there and it just won't come. It may be possible to do it via that, but certainly that's not something that I'm immediately aware of. In that scenario, I would say you don't necessarily need to know or you need to be able to cope with not knowing, because if you're in McDonald's, you won't know what that is. So the answer is, if you don't know, you block everything. But so what I would suggest that would be sensible, although I haven't specifically spoken to the programmer about it, is, as was suggested earlier, that we have a default rule that you can apply to Wi-Fi networks that says, hey, I don't trust anybody, keep me safe. And that would be the default rule that we apply to a Wi-Fi setup. That would seem logical to me. Yep.
Andrew, you mentioned that you fixed some problems reported by users on IRIS.
Yep.
I'm still operating on the ground rules when we first got Iris, which is don't tell us because we probably know and we'd rather do the work instead of respond.
It is fair. It's probably safe to drop us an email, just send one email, don't be like, there's certain people who literally, they send us an email and if we don't reply to them they take it personally and then 2 days later they get sent another email saying, why didn't you reply to my first email, did you get it? Then don't be that guy. Send it, assume we've got it, and if we don't reply it means we're probably working on it. And if we need more information, because what I do is I get it and I forward it to the programmer, and if he's got any more questions he'll probably email you back. If not, I'll sort of log it, and I mean, again, if then another version comes out and it's still not fixed, then you feel free to email me again at that point.
Yeah.
But just that's really what we were afraid of, is because ultimately it all lands on me. And in the nicest possible way, I'm struggling to have enough time for RISC OS Developments and RCOM, and Alan and I getting older, everything else. It's just cut me some slack, please. is all I will say. But yeah, otherwise than that, let us know. And I mean, chances are we may well know that there's a problem there. I know, for example, there's an issue with some of the Cloudflare protected sites where, because it's a slower browser on the platform, they don't know. They really don't like letting people through the Cloudflare security. And we do what's needed, but we don't necessarily do it within the time frame and things that they're expecting of an Android phone or a Windows browser. So there's definitely an issue there with some sites. But again, we're working on things, but it's, you know, the bottom line though is that I'm conscious that what other people are saying is that basically our browser choices without Iris are essentially nothing or NetSurf. And NetSurf is great. I'm absolutely not knocking NetSurf because I do use it for doing various things, mostly converting images and things actually, but it's a great program. And they've just put out another version which is excellent. But not having a modern JavaScript browser out there, especially with the Wi-Fi situation, we need Iris out there that people can just generally use and not feel like it's stuck behind a paywall and I can't use Iris, and you know. So I think our priority at this point has got to be to get something out this year.
I want to talk about Wi-Fi and the Pinebook Pro.
Yes.
What about us who have the original Pinebook? Are we getting it?
You're getting it. I'd like to say yes. I might have to say no in the immediate term. It's not anything against the original Pinebook, but if I explain, essentially, Wi-Fi, different devices have different Wi-Fi chips in them. Made by different companies. Sorry, this is sounding very simplistic, but and each device is not complete in your computer, which sounds a bit weird, but basically there's an element called the firmware, or the binary blob, that is not supplied as part of the hardware. So the first thing that a Wi-Fi driver has to do is download specific firmware to that Wi-Fi chip. Now, the driver I'm showing here, which is Pinebook Pro and Pi, is using a Broadcom controller. It's not the same Broadcom controller, but it's two flavours of a Broadcom controller. And the Broadcom firmware is easily available. To do the original Pinebook, we will need to do a version that supports the network interface and binary blob that's required for that device. I think it was a Realtek chip, but I could be wrong on that because it's a long time since I checked. Which would mean we need to do a driver with the Realtek binary blob, and I don't know if we have the Realtek binary blob easily available. The binary blobs are a little bit hard to source. So it depends. The answer is yes. If we can source a binary blob for it and we can get the driver going, absolutely original Pinebook. But don't say that Andrew said we'd come to the original Pinebook if we can't get a binary blob for it that works sensibly with it. But all being well, yes, but it certainly won't be part of the first release simply because of the availability of the a bit.
If we produce that, do we owe the money we pay when what the original time got broken?
How we will do Wi-Fi?
I think it took £50 off for not having Wi-Fi, so it'd be coming later.
The original plan was to charge extra for Wi-Fi, that is true. And I haven't really thought about how to financialise it. That's one of the problems with an open source world, is that we don't want to necessarily charge for it, for the technologies, but I also need to live, so...
Okay, well, I'll pay the 50 quid.
Yeah, I mean, it may be that we issue it for free and then a sort of say, donations appreciated but no pressure sort of thing.
Yeah.
I certainly don't want anybody to feel like they've got to pay. Well, yeah, I don't know. Like I said, I'm mostly just concentrating on trying to get it to work and release it. So, yeah. Okay, so what time is the time check?
That's for your hat change.
Okay, so we've got 1 minute left. Is that what you're telling me?
Something like that.
Okay, cache first quickly in 1 minute. Cache first basically speeds up disk access by caching files in memory when you use them. It can make things like viewing PDFs really, really fast, even on SD cards and things. It's in public beta. If you ask for it, you get a copy, and as far as I'm aware, it's fully functioning. The only reason we haven't released it is that really we want to put a front end on it, just to make it a little bit friendlier to access. And the guy who does it is the same guy who's doing the Wi-Fi work, and he's been working on the Wi-Fi, not doing the front end for cache.
Does that appear in the configuration?
Well, that's what we want to do is at the moment you do file or open dir, you do an overlay file or whatever to open a file window with the cache first view of the world. Essentially cache first overlays on top of your regular filing system, so you essentially open a file window of your hard disk but through cache first, and then you just use that rather than SDFS column. You do cache first, SDFS column, and you see the same thing, but cache first will then just sit in between, and if the file is from the cache, it will load it from the cache rather than loading it from disk, so that you're not continually pounding your SD card. So very helpful if you're using Iris on an SD card, because something like a font file gets hit several thousand times for every page that you view. If you can hit memory rather than disk several thousand times, that's a win. So that's what cache is all about. But as I say, having something that makes it easy for people to sort of transparently use it, rather than having to type file or open dir cache first or use an OBI file, that's really what the bit that's missing for a 1.0 release. And as I say, because Andy's been doing that, he hasn't been doing that. Sorry.
Can I ask
Question.
what's the difference between that and the program that speeds up Iris into RAM?
Iris RAM. That's a very good question. Iris RAM literally just copies Iris into your RAM disk and runs it from RAM disk.
Okay.
Which I wrote just, really in a sort of afternoon, just to try and make Iris go faster for people. And if you've got enough RAM to do that, and you don't mind having a sort of permanently configured 500 RAM disk and loading Iris into RAM when you boot up, Iris RAM is definitely the best way to run it. But that means your copy of Iris is running entirely out of a RAM disk, which is transitory, so changes to the actual Iris application. Most of the changes will be to the scrap folder, so it's not really a problem. But essentially you're running on a temporary copy of Iris for that. With cache first you're running with the copy that's on your main drive, rather than having to copy it into RAM disk. So it's a little bit more transparent. And the idea was to create cache first was created with the idea of having something for Iris that meant you could just stick it on your SD card and run it, and it would perform a little bit better and more sensibly than running it off the SD card. Obviously, if you can copy it into RAM, run it from RAM, then that is the fastest because you're running from RAM. But you first have to copy it into RAM, which is a bit annoying. So cache first is a simpler, quicker, transparent method. Iris RAM is a sort of belt and braces. This is the fastest it can run, but you've got to copy it into RAM first, which takes 10 seconds to do or something. If you do it at the startup or something like that, it's going to add 10 seconds to your boot time, which you may say, well, it's taken 10 seconds to do that. I could have just waited 10 seconds for it to load when I needed it. So swings and roundabouts.
So you either use one or the other, do you?
You could use both. There's nothing to stop you using both, but you wouldn't see any benefit to running cache first over RAM first particularly.
Cache speeds everything else up as well, not
But,
just
but cache would speed everything up. Like PDFs is the classic example that if you load the user guide and do a search on the user guide, without cache it's painfully slow. With cache it just zips through the pages like it's butter. Similarly, if you're sort of scrolling through pages of the PDF, they just, because it's coming out of RAM rather than having to look up each page on disk every time you do it. It's so yeah, cache benefits everything. And Iris. Iris RAM speeds Iris up to the max, but you have to copy it into RAM, and it's restricted to Iris. So, you know.
Okay.
But it was a good question. I like the question. Any other questions before I take my hat off?
You were talking about cashless with an SD card, but it still has the same effect if you've got a hard disk.
Oh yeah. It's all. I'm using SD cards as an example because that's really slow. There are a lot of people who just buy a Raspberry Pi. One of the things with RISC OS Developments that we have to think about is RISC OS Direct. With RISC OS Direct, we're going to, we're targeting an audience that just downloads RISC OS onto an SD card. They plug it into their Pi 4. I don't know what's going on. Okay. So. Yeah, basically what we want to try and do is make sure that we can deliver a solution that if somebody downloads RISC OS Direct with Iris in and they can click on that, they have as good an experience as we can possibly give, and that's what that's all about. If they have to wait 10 seconds for a browser to load, that's not necessarily... RISC OS is very snappy in so many ways. Waiting for the browser to load kind of dispels this whole RISC OS is really fast image that we've tried to curate. Now, to be fair, it's not massively slow in trying to do the same thing on Linux, on Pi. So we actually had somebody who timed how long it took to turn it on to get the browser window open, and RISC OS with Iris was still way faster than doing the same thing with powering up a Pi and loading Chrome. But on the other hand, if we can make it faster, that's a win. And then those benefits go up the chain. If you're running on eMMC, it's faster still. If you're running off an SSD, the benefit is less, but it's still there. And if you're running off NVMe, well, probably not all that much difference, but hey. Final question.
Am I right in thinking though, if you copied the Iris to RAM, it would make Iris be quicker anyway? Even
that's the point. That is the fastest way to run Iris.
No, sorry, what I mean is you were talking about boot up times, but once you're actually in there, it will still make it faster just generally doing stuff actually on the internet as well, wouldn't it?
Yeah. I mean, that is the best way to run Iris, unquestionably, because the whole thing is just running out of RAM. Cache Plus is a more general solution. It helps Iris if you don't do that, because a new user to RISC OS wouldn't know to do that. And it also applies the same benefit to things like PDFs and other things. Essentially anything you would want to do on RISC OS, you're getting the benefit of disk caching, which is standard on other platforms. Got to get a hat on. Thank you very much, sir. Right, RComp. So when I haven't been doing that, I've been doing RComp. Now,